Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into the experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. While there are a few product management degrees popping up in universities these days, which I love to see, by the way, generally speaking, none of us get a degree in product management and then just go right into our product manager role. We usually start from somewhere else, be it sales or marketing or engineering, or we have a completely different path, like my guest today. I'm excited for this discussion today because many of you out there are on what you might call a non-traditional path and wondering if product management is an option for you. Well, we're here to tell you that it is. And my guest is a great example of not only how to carve your own path, but how to make your own opportunities and maybe most importantly, help others along the way. Mamuna Oladipo is a tech-leading product executive with a track record of building products that have scaled to millions of users. She's currently Senior Vice President of Product Design and Engineering at Kickstarter, where she is managing the product management, product design, and engineering teams. Prior to her current role, she was Vice President of Product at Seamless Docs and Vice President of Product Marketing and Design at Sony Music Entertainment. Before she became a superstar in product management, she worked at the U.S. State Department and in regulatory affairs for an organization representing the global automotive industry. Mamuna, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So I gave your bio, but will you elaborate on your background? Your story is just so interesting and so important.
My story is definitely less than traditional. It's, I think, the case for most folks in product. To start, I am very much a child of immigrant parents from Nigeria. I am also a Navy brat and spent the majority of my formative years in Egypt and Indonesia. I came back to the US for university where I received my BA in biology with minors in national studies and French from George Mason University. So growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor. I should really reiterate here that I am a first-generation American with a strong connection to my Nigerian roots. And so the normal expectation is that you will grow up to become a doctor or a lawyer or anything with a fancy acronym behind your name. So I worked for a while as a lab tech at a hospital in Maryland where I studied for my MCATs as well. I sat for the MCATs and actually got into a few schools before I decided that I didn't want to become a doctor. My parents were not so thrilled as you could imagine.
I bet that was a fun conversation.
Oh, yeah. I would also say that it took a lot for me to realize that this dream, becoming a doctor, really wasn't my own. And so from there, I wanted to get out and spread my wings. I did not have a backup plan, and I honestly lived in a state of panic. I decided to leverage my international background to begin working at the State Department while I figured out what I wanted to do. Because I am, again, that immigrant child, I did have many jobs. And so while I did this, I worked at Fairfax County in the evenings, running programs for at-risk youth at a few community centers and schools. About a year into working at the State Department, I applied for a technical analyst role with a company called the Association of International Automakers, which is now known as Global Automakers. I saw this as an opportunity to leverage my science degree as well as keen interest in cars. I worked there for a little over 3 years, and let me say, just what a wonderful experience. The team there quickly turned into family. They really taught me how to interact in a professional setting. They gave me a large area of responsibility and just space for ownership where I could really figure out how I approach problems and understand my own skills. I had opportunities to travel across the US and speak on behalf of our members on issues, as well as submit comments for legislation around green chemistry, which who can say they've done that before? So it was just such a great experience. I moved my way into the regulatory affairs manager role, which was very exciting for me because I felt like I'd really solidified my presence in the automotive world. But soon enough, I found myself wanting to grow and stretch. So I stuck my head out and started to look for new growth opportunities. What came next really set me along for my product track. So Bloomberg LP had just launched a new vertical in the DC area called Bloomberg Government, and they were looking for policy experts to come in with subject matter expertise and be a PM. In my case, they were looking for policy experts in the transportation world to come in as a product manager to lead development in the vertical. And so I was excited.
So this is interesting. So you parlayed your domain knowledge into a product role, right? That's something the folks out there can learn from. If they're in a non-traditional role, you guys listen up because that domain expert can fit really well into a product role. That's interesting.
Exactly, exactly. So I started there in 2010 with my transportation expertise and none of the product knowledge. At times, it definitely was challenging not knowing anything about product, but there was a nice balance in that I knew, air quotes, everything about transportation, but not so much on the product side. So I had a great opportunity not to skill up on product development, but also manage the launch of a beta, manage groups of analysts who are producing content, conducting user testing, and building out a mobile application, which is great experience in your first sort of product role. After about 3 years or so, I realized that I wanted to step outside the Bloomberg remit and just really experience what the product role had to offer. So I applied for a role out in Silicon Beach, aka Venice, with a startup called Zephyr. Talk about drinking from the fire hose. In this role, I really stretched myself, learning the principles of product design, learning how to practice product marketing, how to properly QA a release and release a product under strict time constraints. I learned how to manage large teams of engineers and really how to navigate the complexities of upper management. I learned a lot in this role, but also quickly burned out. Looking up again, I had always wanted to move to New York, so I started to look for opportunities back on the East Coast. I received an offer from The Orchard, which was acquired soon after my starting by Sony Music Entertainment. This was definitely at that point in my career where my trajectory took off. I came in as senior PM, worked my way up into product director of product design, to then VP of product design and product marketing. I can speak about my experiences here forever, but I'd like to just say, I worked there for almost 5 years. And at the end of my tenure here, they went through restructuring and I was laid off. And I will tell you what a hell of an experience.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So after this, I took some time and just decided I'd give myself the summer off to breathe before looking for a new role. Call this being professionally unemployed. so
I love that.
when, yeah. So when I finally did decide to start looking for a new role, I found a new opportunity pretty quickly with Seamless Docs as their VP of Product. I worked there for about a year and then decided it was time to move on. I then again took a little bit more time and I saw an opportunity with Kickstarter. I started here as a VP of Product and Design. I managed the product management, product design, and brand design teams. Was recently promoted to the role of Senior Vice President of Product Design and Engineering, where I now no longer manage brand design, but took on responsibility of engineering as well as the other teams. And in this role, I can now holistically manage across our platform.
That's awesome. What a cool role you're in now. But what an amazing path. So a couple of themes that I hear from that is number one, you were always learning, right? You were stretching yourself to continue to learn about different things. And number two, you weren't necessarily scared, or at least maybe you were, but you still took the chance, right? Even though you didn't know product management, you knew you could learn and you knew you could bring something to the table. So I think that's things that frankly all of us, could learn from and take along our paths. So what are some other experiences that stand out to you as you think about your progression along your career so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. Earlier on in my career, as I was working at the State Department and global automakers, I would say I had a large amount of fear as I didn't know what I wanted to do. I felt that everyone around me knew where they were going and what they were going to do, and I couldn't figure it out. Really, the lesson I learned here and really want to communicate to those who are in the same boat is that it's okay not to know. Most people really don't. You shouldn't feel that you have to rush to pigeonhole yourself in a specific direction. Give yourself some space and time to feel out what you want to do, test it out. I would say that you'd be amazed at the number of skills you have that can be repurposed in different areas to take on new roles. And there's no harm in trying and seeing what happens. I probably have over 100 versions of my resume, which I have likely sent to my circle of friends over and over and over and over again, asking for help reviewing. So that's definitely one experience there. I'd say the biggest or one of the biggest ones was being laid off. I mean, what a whirlwind of emotions. I can first say it's a huge blow to your ego, regardless of who you are. People oftentimes don't talk about the whole experience But what I would say is that I'm thankful to have gone through this because it really causes you to question your skills and capabilities. Then once you've gone through that phase, you start to understand just who you are, what you want to do, and reflect on that part of your career and start to think about what you want to do next. I really took the time to understand my contributions, what I do well, what I maybe not do so well, and where I want to go next, what environments work well for me, what types of people I work well with, what organizations I want to work for. And I would really encourage anyone who goes through this to be just kind to yourself and know that you're not alone. I remember speaking to a friend during this time who said something early into my time of being laid off, which took me a while to understand. But he said, now that you know what it feels like, you've ripped off the Band-Aid and you never have to be afraid of it. And I would say that's 100% accurate. This experience gave me an unexpected amount of confidence as I approached working. Not that I would do anything purposely to be fired or laid off, but as human beings, we generally operate from a place of fear. And by knowing that feeling, you get confidence in the path you're taking.
Yeah, I want to jump in here. This is such important and good advice, right? Especially right now, then people are being laid off and the economy is not wonderful and we're going through what we're going through. What else would you say to those folks specifically?
Yeah. So, think about creating opportunities. So, a lot of times you'll find that opportunities don't just fall in your lap. I learned very early on in my career that I would need to take a bit of risk, and risk is very uncomfortable. And it's very much a time that you're going to stretch and grow in that discomfort. You have to really ask for those projects and experience that you want. You have to look at your career as a story and ask yourself, what is that next chapter? And what am I missing to get there? Then you work to try to close the gap between where you are and what you want to be in your future. I would say another thing is not being afraid to speak up for yourself. Always be respectful, but be assertive. Usually, the worst someone can tell you is no. And even that can sometimes be a good thing. If your employer or your boss says no without offering you an explanation or path or a timeline, you know that maybe you're not at a place where you can grow and you can decide how and when you want to move on. I would say articulating what you want and what you need to be successful. This one definitely took me a lot of time to understand. I went blindly into this at first, just taking opportunities as it came without thinking about it and really just thinking about me. Over time, I realized that I needed to put myself first and understand what environments I actually thrived in. This adjusted over time as I spoke to people around me and gathered advice. When I was already in a role, I approached the conversation in terms of what the organization needs and then position my needs accordingly. I didn't want to come off as feeling entitled, but more so clarifying how these asks actually benefited the team and organization. Then, as I evaluated new roles or opportunities in my career, I would clearly articulate how I work and think while asking how the team is structured and what the org was looking to accomplish. Oftentimes, when I am advising people in their product careers, this is one of the things I really try to drive home and help craft their own set of asks. Another item is just finding a mentor. It's hard. I remember when I was working at the orchard, I wanted so badly to find someone that I could reach out to and just talk and understand what my future looked like, whether what I was experiencing was normal, talk through my day to day with someone who had done it before. I decided to leverage LinkedIn and I reached out to several people who were outside of my network asking for help. Unfortunately, I didn't get any responses and gave up. I wish I had a better suggestion for how to approach this. I know that many people go through the same struggle. And so people reach out to me on Slack groups or LinkedIn. I definitely make myself available to offer what I can in hopes of preventing that same feeling that I felt of being left to kind of fend for myself there. I would say, try to be creative in your approach and don't give up like I did. You hopefully will connect with a person who is open to spending some time with you and providing you that guidance.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love a couple of things you said there. One, just that immediate thing you just said about mentorship. It is hard to find someone, but keep trying because you just find one person or maybe two mentors along the way, and they really can make a difference. I also loved what you said about ensuring that it's a good fit for both sides, right? And not just trying to get a job because you need a job. And I know we've all been there, we all need a paycheck, but really doing the due diligence to understand whether or not you're going to fit into a culture and set yourself up for success. I think that's really important advice that you gave there. So, my final question for you, I have to ask this because it's so important. What advice would you give to women in technology and specifically Black women in tech?
Yeah. I would say that as a woman in tech, a lot of times you'll be the only woman in a room, not to mention if you are a Black woman in tech. So I'd encourage you in those times when you are facing imposter syndrome to go back to those things that you know and speak up. Let your presence and value be known. Don't let others speak on your behalf. I would also say don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something and when to ask for help. While people may speak factually, we shouldn't assume that they know everything, and the expectation is not that you will either. So I would just keep those in mind. I would say, again, I didn't have a good answer for how to find a mentor. I have spent a lot of time on personal development, reading, taking courses, and asking questions where possible. Now, the advent of Slack and many of these groups like Women in Product popping up, I've definitely had an influx of people reaching out, asking questions, or for just career guidance. I can proudly say that every person who's reached out to me, I've taken time to speak to and really invest time in providing them guidance as I want to give back what I can based on my own personal experiences. I definitely see an opportunity to break the cycle where, people get turned away feeling like they don't have anyone to turn to. As a Black woman in tech, I've been especially aware of some of the perceptions folks have maybe approached me with throughout my career, and I've worked to break those down. I don't think it's anything that we should shy away from. I acknowledge that the way that we may have been raised and our own professional experiences have made it harder at times to get some of the same opportunities as others. And so it's important not to ignore it, but creatively work around it. I would say my current role at Kickstarter, my CEO, has always encouraged me to bring my whole self to work, and not having to feel like I have to partition myself, as we often do feel, is great. And it did take me a while to feel comfortable with this concept, just given my previous experiences. But I'm thankful he said it out loud. I do feel that there are advantages to being my curious, odd, and direct self without having to think about what others may think about how I am or how I'm coming off. I do acknowledge, however, that this is not the case for everyone. I would also say, while there may not be traditional mentors, there are people in your life that you could go to for different things. I'm thankful to have two caring brothers who want the best for me and call out any trends that they notice, to be able to lean on my mother who, in her strong entrepreneurial spirit, my dad for his experiences through his military career, where he definitely broke past several ceilings to reach the role of captain in the Navy. And growing up watching both of them really made me the right type of persistent and stubborn, probably to their own detriment. I have a lovely husband who continues to push me to be better, and oftentimes challenging my doubts that inevitably creeps in from time to time. So, it really helps to create those support systems around you to help remind you that you are more than capable of accomplishing what is in front of you.
Yeah, that's just such great advice. And again, if you don't have a professional mentor, there are folks in your life, hopefully, that you can turn to. I love that you've got such a strong support system that obviously, has helped you along the way, and you have turned that around and are a mentor and kind of a shining light to others. So this has just been a great discussion. I've loved chatting with you, Mamuna. Thank you so much for joining me and for sharing your experiences with the audience.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.